So this is going to be an interesting sermon. It's going to be kind of like in the vein of what I gave earlier this March. Because if anyone was here, I spoke about St. Patrick's Day and about Esther and about some connections that I saw between them. And to me, it was kind of funny to do that because, like, St. Patrick's Day, it's not a Jewish holiday at all. But I wanted to see what some some elements that God teaches in just kind of like random American holidays. So today is going to be like a very specific subset of just kind of like some of the things that I've been thinking about this month in October, because as everyone knows, on October 31st, people celebrate throughout America Halloween, and Halloween's a very like interesting and complicated holiday, I think, for believers. So I only want to talk about like a very specific aspect of it, and not necessarily like kind of the spookier elements or anything like that, but just about what happens on the night of Halloween where children dress up and go from door to door. And I was really kind of struck by how strange it is that when we think about hospitality and about giving hospitality, we often think about our friends. We think about having people over and everybody looks the way that they want to look and that we recognize them, and we celebrate our friendship and our love together. But on Halloween, it's very strange because strangers come to your door and they're wearing disguises, and then you give them things. And I mean, you give them candy, so maybe that's not exactly good, but no, I mean, the kids love candy, so it's okay. But it's interesting that you're showing hospitality to people that you don't know and people that are in disguise. Like you could maybe, I mean, I guess I've very rarely been, I've very rarely been in the situation where people come to my house and I'm the one giving them candy. That's more so been my parents when I've lived with them. But it is interesting because I've definitely seen in like movies, like a kid comes to a family's door, and then the person who's giving out the candy recognizes that that's a troublemaking kid that caused them problems. So like but they were still giving hospitality. So those are kind of some questions that I was grappling with going into this, because hospitality is really important to me. When I was living in New York, the way that we did ministry, and probably the most effective way that we did ministry, was hosting weekly Shabbat dinners and inviting as many people as we could, inviting people we didn't know. And there's something kind of scary when you invite people that you don't know. I mean, kind of obviously, but like even beyond like physical safety, like we had a couple situations where someone that we wanted to minister to kind of was a little bit raucous at our Shabbat dinners and like used profanity and kind of like was a bit of a chaotic presence. And the people that were hosting the Shabbats, we talked about that, like, should we say something? Like, this is kind of a holy place, and they're kind of behaving in X, Y, and Z manner. And we agreed eventually after discussion, because we did discuss it, that it would be better to show hospitality in just such a free way, where like our discomfort about what this person was doing we would leave that at the door, so we would be fully open to them. So hospitality, I think, is incredibly important. But what I found interesting is that when you read the scriptures, like it's a bit of a hidden virtue. Like you read the fruits of the Spirit, there is no fruit of hospitality. And in fact, like hospitality is only mentioned in the New Testament 3 times, and it's mentioned, I think, I'm forgetting the exact number, but I actually don't know if there's a word like given for hospitality in the Tanakh. But hospitality is so important. And I was reading this person named Waldemar Jansen, who just was talking about how like if you go into the Torah specifically, hospitality is everywhere. Hospitality is kind of the foundation of our faith and our experience with God at all. It's the foundation of creation in a sense. So first I want to talk about hospitality. And to do that, let's turn to Genesis chapter 18. Let me fix my yarmulke. Genesis 18. So Genesis 18 is where Abraham hosts three angels, and actually it's God whom he's hosting. But he's hosting 3 people, and this is the passage that I actually was talking about a couple weeks ago on Rosh Hashanah, because it's the passage where Sarah laughs and where God says, you are going to have a son, and it will be Sarah's son. It says, the Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of the tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree. Let me get you something to eat so that you can be well refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to see your servant. Very well, they answered, do as you say. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs, which is a weight, and I don't exactly remember how much it is, but it's big. Get 3 seahs of your finest flour and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran to the herd, and he selected a choice, tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. Notice how all the speed words here. Like Abraham is rushing. He's not being lazy with his hospitality. He's running around. He's sweating. He then brought some curds and milk, cottage cheese, nice, and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. He's not even eating with them, which I will say, at my Shabbats in New York, I was definitely eating with them. And actually, it became kind of a bit that I would just eat the leftovers throughout the week and just almost never buy food. There was one month when I only spent like $20 of my own personal food because we always had so many leftovers. So I was not like Abraham. Abraham is a special person in terms of his hospitality. And actually, he's known, if you just type in Abraham hospitality, in like every tradition that honors Abraham, his hospitality is so emphasized. And we don't usually think about Abraham in that way, like a little bit, but we think about Abraham as a great man of faith. And we think, we so quickly go to the Akedah, which is such a beautiful and important passage. Or we go to the way that he was so old, and yet he was able to have a child. But a lot of like our spiritual brothers and sisters throughout history, like especially if you read like the fathers of the believing community from like the 3rd century or 2nd century, it's like Abraham as a hospitable person. And the rabbis emphasize this too. It's that he was so excited to give hospitality. Because what I didn't really realize is that if you look at the passage and you kind of look at the Hebrew, it doesn't seem like Abraham knows that he is hosting God. He says, my Lord, but that word for Lord is not the same, it's not so here's a quick aside when you read your Bible. If it says Lord and Lord is in all caps, that's actually God's holy name that has been transliterated into English as Lord to kind of like pay homage. But that's Yahweh or something like that. So if it says Lord in all caps, that it means like they're saying God's holy name. But if it's just capital L Lord, then that's like master or maybe sometimes even as simple as sir. So when he says, please come eat with me, my Lord, he's really just saying, please come eat with me, sir. He's just showing honor to a guest. He's bowing to the ground just for a random guest. So and then later on when God is talking to him, because right after, so one of the reasons why God comes at this time is to tell Abraham that he's going to have a son. But another reason is because he's inviting Abraham into his inner counsel about what he's going to do about Sodom and Gomorrah. So Abraham does learn who this person is, but he's just trying to be hospitable. And all of these things that he's doing is just because he's honoring a guest. And in this time period, if you look at like the history of the ancient Near East, of the Middle East at that time, hospitality is one of the most important virtues. And the reason for that is very physical and material. It's because if you're living in the desert, like there's no pipeline of water into your house. Like imagine living in Los Angeles, or even more so, like more like Pasadena, like further inland, and there's no electricity, there's no grocery store. It's everything is like taken care of by yourself. If you maybe have a good situation, like you have your sheep and everything is good for you, like, okay, that's really great, but anything could happen. But even more so, if a guest kind of shows up and you don't show that person hospitality, you're kind of signing a death warrant for them. So hospitality was a very important, like thing for them at that time. But it's clearly more so for Abraham. And interestingly enough, the idea of being a nomad, or as the Bible often says, as a tent dweller, is actually like, it's not just, oh yeah, Abraham was a tent dweller, Jacob was a tent dweller, that's what the patriarchs were. Like that's just an interesting fact about their lives. In reality, that this lifestyle of being a nomad, of being a tent dweller, is a sign of their righteousness. It's a sign that they are men and women of faith. If you look at, especially in Genesis, the evil people are Nimrod, people like him, who build a city and who say, I will make a name for myself in this part of the world. But the people who truly honor God are the ones who recognize that they might be taken from one place to another. Abraham's righteousness means that he's quick to move. That is where, that's something for us, is that we should have mindsets of being a nomad. So another great villain of Genesis is actually Laban. And Laban, one of his great villainies, and I don't exactly remember where I read this, but I remember like seeing a rabbi particularly critical of Laban and saying that he actually wanted to destroy the early Jewish people. He didn't want them to like be their own thing. He was constantly conniving against Jacob. He was an early Haman of sorts. That's what they say. And I find that very interesting because his great sin is that he was not very hospitable. He had Jacob in an advantageous position for him, and he was constantly trying to figure out how to get wealthy off of him, to make him work for 14 years, and all he got, I mean, the Bible says he who gets a wife gets a good thing, but 14 years for just to be able to get married, that's pretty crazy to me. In Genesis 31, 5 through 7, Jacob lays out this charge against Laban, and he says, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. And this is where we see that Jacob is a man of faith, is that Jacob recognizes that he's been taken advantage of for at least 15 years, but that God has protected him. So Laban is the example of inhospitality. Abraham and all the patriarchs are examples of hospitality. Another interesting example of hospitality and just the way that it kind of like, it holds so many righteous things together is the example of Lot. Now, Lot is an interesting person because we don't see very much of him in the Bible. We see that he is Abraham's nephew, and he travels with him, but when push comes to shove, Lot is not like Abraham. Lot doesn't really want to be a tent dweller. Now, Lot is not an unrighteous, evil person, as we're going to see, but Lot would rather live in Sodom where there is security and he's living in a town and he can kind of like he doesn't have to be as much of a man of faith as Abraham is. But at the same time, when push comes to shove, when angels come to Sodom and Gomorrah to look out for him, he acts. So this is Genesis 19, 1 through 3. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them, and he bowed down with his face to the ground. He doesn't know they're angels. My lords, he said, please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning. No, they answered, we will spend the night in the square. But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. And later on, we see that like Lot is willing to die to protect his guests when the people of Sodom come out to attack them. He's a flawed man, and if you keep reading, he's a man with a lot of issues. Like he definitely is unable to not be drunk. Like he has the sin of drunkenness. He's very much like he continues in this lifestyle of not being willing to be a man of tents. He goes and hides in a cave after Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. He doesn't go and rejoin his uncle. But at the same time, 2 Peter says that God condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, but he rescued Lot, and he calls him a righteous man. who is distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless. This is 2 Peter 2. And we see a little bit about what is so special about Lot in Hebrews 13, 1-3. It says, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Continue to remember those in prison as you were together with them in prison, as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. Let me take a drink. So Lot is able to cover, in a sense, a lot of his issues by the fact that when he saw strangers, he was quick to protect them, and he was quick to take care of them. These strangers are weak compared to the people who have stability, people who have their herds, who have their house, and he acted quickly. So what's the reason for this? Why is hospitality so important? We've discussed the material reason and just the ethical reason. We should take care of people because they're weaker, and if we have a home and we have things to be able to give, it's the right thing to do. But actually, there is a theological reason for this, and it again starts in Genesis, and it starts in the whole Torah, where we see the reason behind why hospitality is so important for us. And that is Genesis 2:15, which says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work and take care of it." So notice this. This is in Genesis chapter 2, where God has just constructed the Garden of Eden, and he's just made it so good and so beautiful and exactly how he wanted it to be. To whom does the Garden of Eden belong? It belongs to God. But God isn't going to enjoy the Garden of Eden. In a certain sense, he does, because he's able to look at it and reflect on its goodness. But God doesn't eat. God doesn't sleep. God doesn't, experience the cool of the day in the way that humans do. So God created the Garden of Eden that was always going to be his for Adam. It was an initial act of hospitality, where God is saying, I am going to invite everything that I'm going to make into my goodness and into my joy. And that is putting him into the Garden of Eden. Now, a lot of things have happened since the Garden of Eden, but one thing has remained the same, and that is that everything belongs to the Lord. Psalm 24, 2-4 says, "The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants, belong to the Lord. For he founded it on the seas and established it on the waters. Who may ascend to the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not trust in an idol or swear by a false god." The Torah emphasizes this again when we see how the people of Israel are supposed to live in the Promised Land. The land, this is Leviticus 25:23. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers. Perpetually, people who believe in God should recognize that we are foreigners and strangers, and that we live every day on the grace of God. In the nation that he wanted to make, he actually made it into the laws that your land could not be sold because it didn't belong to you. It's like a trust. It belongs to God, and whoever was going to live on that land was just like a tenant living for free, because God was being so hospitable to them. And you see in Psalms that it's, even though he was able to implement it so perfectly in the land, and of course, unfortunately, our forefathers and foremothers did not always participate in that. And you see in Jeremiah and Isaiah that God is very upset when they do not honor jubilees and do not return land to its original inhabitants. But we see that the entire world belongs to God. So we are always foreigners and strangers. Always. If we say that we own something, in a certain sense, by human law we do, but by God's law, it's always going to be his. And this applies to everything. Philippians 3:20 says, and I didn't include this in the notes, so if you want to write it down, Philippians 3:20 says, "For our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Yeshua HaMashiach." So in everything that we claim that is according to a material sense of ownership, I am a citizen, I have this land, I have this wealth, it all belongs to God. And our only true citizenship is our citizenship in heaven. Okay, so there's the theology of ownership and the theology of hospitality. An anecdote of this is, and how to properly behave with hospitality, is that I'll use myself as a negative example. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to like a function or a get-together or something like that, and I just wanted to be inclusive, so I invited other people to it. And the thing is I was being generous with someone else's hospitality. So it ended up being fine, and the person was a very hospitable person, but it created stress because all of a sudden, like, the population of a party is doubled, and it's like, oh, do we have enough food? Do we have enough this? Do we have enough chairs? And I saw that there was stress being caused, and I realized, oh, this isn't my hospitality that I'm being generous with. This is someone else's. And that's not a cheap thing to do. However, God does want us to be generous with his hospitality. And if we are not generous with his hospitality, we're kind of being like the exact reverse of me. I was being generous with someone else's hospitality. We are not being generous with what's not our hospitality, which is equally wrong. We're hoarding in a sense. We're giving things or holding on to things that don't belong to us. Okay, so that's hospitality. Now to think about disguise and what the stranger means. Now, disguise is very interesting in the scriptures because we see both righteous people and unrighteous people entering into disguise. We see kings, we see prophets. There's a really interesting passage about how Samuel wanted to anoint David. So he kind of now people did know who he was, but he kind of entered in a sneaky way to sort of like a spy so that Saul and his army wouldn't hurt him. And we see Josiah entered into a battle in disguise. We see Ahab entered into battle in disguise. Now, honestly, both times it ended really badly for them. But yeah, people enter into disguise, and this is something that the people of God do and the people of the world do. Part of the reason that disguise is so interesting is that God is also in disguise. We have all these expectations about who God is. We have all these expectations about who people are, but it's often not what we expect. 1 Kings 19:11 through 13 talks about how Elijah has an encounter with God, and it's not the encounter that he expects. He's expecting God to be one way, and God is another way. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood in the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Now, actually, I missaid that. Elijah was expecting this, or at least he knew it. But I think when we're reading it and we see mighty wind, incredible earthquake, we're like, oh, the God who made everything and is all-powerful, that's where he is. But no, we would be wrong. He was a whisper. And there are a lot of aspects where it can be hard to recognize God. And the Bible is very clear about that. Psalm 18:11 says, "He made darkness his hiding place. Dark storm clouds, his canopy around him." So when we look at, so God is able to hide in darkness, but also he's able to hide in light. 1 Timothy 6:16 says, "Who alone possesses immortality and dwells in unapproachable light, whom no man has seen or can see. To him be honor and eternal dominion. Amen." So here he is in darkness and here he is in light. We can't see through him to see him, because God is just so far beyond us. And even thinking about where God is or when God is, the great philosophers of our faith have said oh, No, God is outside of our time. God is outside of time. God doesn't experience where like we do because he's omnipresent. We have a place, we have a non-place. But these constructs don't apply to God because when God created the world, he created space. There was no space before, and you can't even say before because there was no time. These things don't apply to God, so we can't really understand him in a certain sense. Like, we have all these scriptures that talk about who God is, but like, God is beyond that. And Maimonides, and I think that he was kind of going a little bit too far about this, he said you can't even really talk about God except in negative ways. You can't say God is, you can only say God is not. Now, I think that you can talk about God by analogy. God is like this, God is like that, and that's what you often do when you use all these words and stuff like that. When you say God is the Lion of Judah, that's a true thing. But obviously, God isn't an actual lion. That wouldn't make any sense. So God is so far beyond us. And Job 9:11 says, like, builds on this and says, "Were he to pass by me, I would not see him. Were he to move past me, I would not perceive him." God is in disguise. And God's people are often also in disguise, or at least are called to be guests and strangers. I talked about Samuel earlier, but Elijah was also, he was a stranger, and he was a guest, and he was someone who brought danger with him because he seemed kind of strange. 1 Kings 17:10-14 says, "So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called her and asked, 'Would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I may have a drink?' As she was going to get it, he called, 'And bring me, please, a piece of bread.' 'As surely as the Lord your God lives,' he replied, 'I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die.' Elijah said to her, 'Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said, but first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain on the land.'" So it's our responsibility to be like the widow of Zarephath and look for the prophets in our midst, to look for the people of God in our midst. And in a similar way, it's our responsibility to find God. The Bible commands us, when you seek me and you find me, seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart. So God wants us to look for him. God wants us to find him. God wants us to find people in our midst that are people of God that we can take care of. And she got a great blessing because she was hospitable, and she didn't really know who this person was, but notice that in the middle of an incredible drought, she was offering water. When he asked for bread, she said, "I actually don't even have any bread." But she was quick to offer. And then when he made this promise, she had faith, and she said, "Okay, I am going to do what you say." And this could end in disaster for all of us. And this is even more intense because the Bible does talk about how there are false prophets and that villainous beings do use disguise. Matthew 7:15 says, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves." And 2 Corinthians 11:12-15 says, "And I will keep on doing what I am doing in order to cut the ground out from under those who want an opportunity to be considered equal with us in the things they boast about. For such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising then if his disciples also masquerade as servants of righteousness. Their end will be what their actions deserve." So I only bring this up to say that on a day like Halloween, where people are in disguises, like, that is revealing something about how life generally is that we can be tricked because we only have so much knowledge, we only have so much understanding, and we can be confused, and sometimes even like the most important person in our lives, God, like, we can be confused about who he is. And all the words in the scriptures are so important to describing who God is, but in order to like get into a relationship with him, there's still a bit of a gap because he's just so far beyond us and we are held down by our sinful natures. So we need help to be able to see through the darkness that he clouds himself in and the unapproachable light that he dwells in. We need help with that. So how do we do that? And I feel like the answer is almost always the Shabbat school answer is through Yeshua. Through Yeshua, we can have an understanding about who God is, and we can be like him in hospitality. We can see who he is, and we can have a relationship with him. Now, how do we see that? John 14, 7 through 11 says, "If you know me, you will also know my Father. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." "Lord," said Philip, "show us the Father, and that's enough for us." Yeshua said to him, "Have I been among you all this time without you knowing me, Philip? The one who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I speak to you, I do not speak on my own. The Father who lives in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Otherwise, believe because of the works themselves." Excuse me. So Yeshua is God in the flesh. But Yeshua is not in unapproachable light. 1 John says that we have seen him and we have handled him, we have touched him, because Yeshua is a man. Yeshua is a person just like us. Yeshua lived like us. Yeshua suffered like us. But even beyond suffering, Yeshua, we could have if Yeshua came down right here, we could have a conversation with a human being, but also we are having access to God. And that is the miracle of the incarnation. That's the incredible thing about the incarnation. And Athanasius of Alexandria, a really important father in the early community, he said that potentially the most important thing, or at least one of the most important things about the incarnation, is not the fact that Yeshua suffered in exchange for us, but the fact that with Yeshua here, we can know God so intimately now, because God's a human being now. And God is still always God. God didn't stop being God and become only a human being. God is forever both. Because Yeshua is both, I should say. Yeshua, when we talk to Yeshua, we are talking to a human being, but we are also experiencing the one true, all-powerful God who lives in unapproachable light and cannot be seen because he is so far beyond us. And that is the miracle of the incarnation. That's what we have access to. When we love Yeshua, when we invite him into our lives, when we are hospitable to him in a sense, we are inviting the one true God. We are returning his infinite offer of hospitality to us by inviting him into our lives. So Yeshua says that to see through the disguises, in a sense, of God, you just have to know him, and then you will know the Father. To know Yeshua means to know the Father undisguised. But now this is where things kind of get a little bit interesting, is that sometimes, when we're looking to have a relationship with Yeshua, sometimes Yeshua can also be in disguise. Now, what does that mean? Now, this is not Yeshua in disguise in the sense that, we can't know him, because he is a person. The Bible talks about who he is, so we can have a relationship with Yeshua as he is. And we see who he is. He's the Good Shepherd. We see him in his parables. We see what he's about. We see what he cared about. We read the Sermon on the Mount, and we see his heart. So we can have a relationship with Yeshua. But there's something a little bit interesting beyond this, is that Yeshua sometimes comes in disguise later on, or at least in a certain sense. Now I'm going to read these verses, and then we can talk about what that means. Matthew 25:34 through 40 says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" So this is a really intense passage. I think it's hard to grapple with sometimes, because it's so intense with the way that Yeshua reveals the way that he identifies with us. Because in the same sense that when we have a relationship with God and we are joined with him. Like through the Holy Spirit, we are joined with Yeshua so that we can die and rise and experience God forever with him in Yeshua. That's what it means to be his body. That's what it means to be his bride. We are going to have unity with him. But in addition to this, like metaphysical, spiritual miracle of Yeshua in us and us in Yeshua, like Yeshua identifies with humans now. So when we see people and we like show hospitality or don't show hospitality to strangers, to the weak, like Yeshua sees that and he recognizes that it's as if we're doing it or not doing it for him. Now, Yeshua isn't actually in disguise because Yeshua he's in one body now. Like there is only one Yeshua, and he's in heaven right now. But he identifies with people who are suffering because he suffered. And he identifies with people who are homeless. He identifies with people who are imprisoned, he identifies with people who are hungry. So when we are hospitable, we are not just being like God, but we are being hospitable to God because we are being hospitable to Yeshua. For us to have a relationship with Yeshua and for us to really like make it real, for us to have to show that we have the faith that recognizes that the Bible is true, we want to treat people not the way that the world values them, but the way that Yeshua values them. And Yeshua values each person like as someone that he identifies with because he's a person, especially the weak. So in the same way that angels are in disguise, like literally, like you might one day take care of an angel, Yeshua says that treat people as if they were him in disguise. And in that, you can be hospitable like he's hospitable. And Yeshua wants to be really hospitable to us. Yeshua, like hospitality is an incredibly important attribute for Yeshua. It's something that he really emphasizes. Matthew 22, 1-4 says, Yeshua spoke to them again in parables, saying that the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, tell those who had been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to my wedding banquet. Yeshua is so excited to be hospitable to us. And this is where things kind of become a little bit hard for us. Because now Yeshua is not in disguise. Now God isn't in disguise because we see who Yeshua is. But the world still is in between us. And what faith is piercing that disguise. Faith is saying, this person wants to invite me to a banquet. I kind of have like my life going on right now. Because that's what a lot of the people said. They said, oh, I have to do this thing. I have to pick up my crops. I have a lot of responsibilities. I can't come to your party. What, Yeshua, you're inviting me to a party? I'm busy. That's the rational thing. That's the reasonable thing according to the ways of the world. But faith says, I am not going to listen to how the world thinks about people, and I'm not going to take the world's perspective on how to think about wealth and how to think about friendship and love and all these different things. I'm going to trust that Messiah's way is the right way. And that's really hard. And this is where I'm really speaking to myself. And I feel like God has really been teaching me a lot about faith lately, is that it is the foundation for everything. That love is the most important thing. But faith teaches us how to love. Because faith teaches us like that we shouldn't just love yours. There are songs that say, hey, love yours. But like, no. Faith teaches us, love the least of Yeshua's brethren. Faith teaches us, don't just be hospitable to your friends and the people that you know will give something back to you, but be hospitable to strangers. And thereby you might be hospitable to Yeshua in disguise. So we need to grasp onto that faith and say, I want to be hospitable to Yeshua. I don't want to just be hospitable according to the ways of the world. I want to give like Yeshua. And I want to hold fast to him and believe that when I have a relationship with Yeshua, I have a relationship with the infinite God who dwells in unapproachable light. And I want to leave us with this last invitation because when we're thinking about Yeshua inviting us to a wedding feast, Revelation and Song of Songs, I think, give really good imagery for the hospitality that we want to experience. Revelation 3:20, this is a verse that I'm sure everyone's heard before, but I would be remiss if I didn't say it. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to eat to him or her and eat with them, and they with me. Yeshua is standing at the door and knocking. He wants to come in and have a relationship with us. And this is written to believing communities, so this isn't just like you're either with him or you're not. It's a, what's the word? It's a qualitative thing. You can be eating with him at any time of day. He always wants to come in and be with you. And he's standing at the door and knocking, and let's invite him in and celebrate the wedding feast with him. This should be our mindset. Song of Songs 5:2. I slept. And that's a certain sense what it's like living in our bodies, because until we get our new bodies, we're always going to be like a little bit asleep, waiting for the resurrection. I slept, but my heart was awake. A sound, my beloved is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one, for my head is wet with dew, my locks with the drops of night. Yeshua wants to be with us, and we just have to say yes. That's the miracle of faith, that we can say yes, and that we can have him in our lives. And that we can say yes, and that's the journey of faith too, is that there's always another day that we can invite him into our lives and learn from him and love him more. So yeah, I commend all of us that on October 31st, when you see kids in costumes asking for candy, think about how God was in disguise and now he's not. And that we still live in a world where we are looking through a glass darkly. I don't remember the verse there, but that is from the Bible, that it's like looking through a glass darkly. But that we can be hospitable to God by being hospitable to Yeshua, by being hospitable to those that are made in his image. And if you have not had that experience of inviting Yeshua into your life, I recommend it. I think it's the most important thing that you can do, to invite him into your life and to let him save you and to let him change your mindset from a worldly one to a one that is covered by faith in him, by his faith in a certain sense. That's how the Bible describes it. We are saved by his faith, by faith in him. All right, I'm gonna pray for us. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so thankful to your immense generosity to us. Before you made us, there was no even thought about who we were. We've always only ever existed by your pleasure and at your generosity. Lord, I pray that we remember this. I pray that we remember that the earth is yours and the fullness thereof. Yes, Lord, I pray that we remember that. I also pray that we remember that specifically we can have a relationship with you, and that you have broken down the disguise, the wall, the curtain that was in between us by coming down, by being a person, and by dying and rising from the dead, and by giving us all your incredibly hospitable promises to live with you, that our citizenship is no longer on earth, that we have homes in heaven, not just here. Yes, Lord, I thank you, and I pray that that's in our hearts, that we have a relationship with you. We have a relationship with the God who is so far beyond us, it's even beyond our imagination, because you are a person now. I pray for any of us that has not yet received you, who has not yet opened the door for you to be in their lives. Lord, I pray that you make your goodness known to us. I pray that you make your goodness known to anyone who is leaving the door locked and who's nervous about a stranger like you coming in. I pray that we treat those in our lives as if they were angels in disguise. I pray that we treat strangers And I pray that we are not grappled by fear, but that we are held fast by faith, by seeing through your eyes, not through ours. I pray all these things in Yeshua's name. Amen.